They say trust is built slowly but destroyed in an instant. I never truly understood that until the day my entire world collapsed around me. My name is Jennifer Park, and this is the story of how my best friend of 9 years systematically destroyed everything I had worked for, and how I spent nearly a year dismantling her life in return. This is a story about the darkness that lives inside all of us, waiting for the right moment to emerge. It all began in the gleaming glass towers of Innovate Tech Corporation, a booming technology consultancy firm in Austin, Texas. I was 29 years old, a senior solutions architect with a track record of turning failing projects into success stories. My reputation in the company was solid. People knew me as the person who could rescue any project, no matter how dire the circumstances. Sarah Mitchell had been my closest friend since we both joined Innovate Tech as junior developers 9 years ago. We had been through everything together. Late nights debugging impossible code, celebrating our first major promotions with champagne and cheap plastic cups, supporting each other through devastating breakups and family emergencies. She had held my hand at my father's funeral. I had helped her move apartments 4 times. We weren't just colleagues or friends. We were sisters by choice, bonded by years of shared experiences and mutual support. Sarah was my opposite in almost every way, and that's what made our friendship work so beautifully. Where I was methodical and cautious, she was spontaneous and bold. Where I preferred quiet evenings with books and wine, she thrived in crowded bars and social gatherings. Her personality was magnetic. When Sarah walked into a room, people noticed. Her infectious energy could turn any mundane meeting into something memorable. I genuinely admired her ability to connect with people so effortlessly. Looking back now, I can see the signs I missed. The way she would pump me for information about my projects while sharing little about her own. The subtle competitive edge that would creep into her voice when I received praise. The momentary flashes of something dark behind her eyes when good things happened to me. But I loved her like family. And love makes us blind to the truth we don't want to see. The opportunity that would change everything arrived on a humid Thursday in May. Our CEO, David Richardson, announced during a company-wide meeting that he was creating a new executive position, Vice President of Digital Innovation. The role came with everything we had dreamed about since our first days at the company. The salary was $200,000 annually, plus performance bonuses that could add another $50,000. There were stock options valued at potentially millions if the company went public within the next 3 years. Most importantly, this position would have direct influence over company strategy, sitting in the executive boardroom where the real power resided. The announcement sent shockwaves through our department. Everyone wanted that position, but only a few had the qualifications and track record to be seriously considered. After the initial screening process, which included portfolio reviews and preliminary interviews with the board, only 2 candidates remained, Sarah and me. I remember the moment we found out. We were having lunch at our favorite food truck near the office, the one that served incredible Korean barbecue tacos. Sarah's phone buzzed first, then mine, almost simultaneously. We opened the emails from HR at the same time, reading that we had both advanced to the final round of consideration. For a moment, we just looked at each other, and then we started laughing. "Well, this is going to be interesting," Sarah said, raising her Coke can in a mock toast. "May the best woman win. And may the loser buy the most expensive dinner in Austin," I added, clinking my can against hers. We promised each other that no matter who got the position, our friendship would survive. We had been through too much together to let a job come between us. We even helped each other prepare for the evaluation process, sharing strategies and giving feedback on each other's practice presentations. I told her about my concerns regarding the board's perception of my leadership style, about my worries that I came across as too technical and not strategic enough. She told me about her insecurities regarding her project management experience, about how she felt she lacked the systematic approach the role required. What I didn't know was that every vulnerability I shared, every concern I voiced, every weakness I revealed was being carefully cataloged and weaponized against me. The evaluation process stretched across 22 brutal weeks. We each had to develop and present 4 comprehensive strategic proposals for the company's digital transformation. We underwent extensive psychological evaluations, including personality assessments and cognitive testing. We participated in simulated crisis management scenarios. We were interviewed separately by every member of the executive team, some multiple times. The process was designed to test not just our technical skills, but our ability to handle pressure, think strategically, and lead effectively. Throughout those 22 weeks, Sarah maintained her supportive presence in my life. She would send me encouraging text messages before major presentations. She brought me my favorite coffee during late-night preparation sessions. She listened patiently when I vented about the stress and the pressure. She was my rock, my constant support, my safe harbor in the storm. I should have known it was all a performance. The night everything changed. The night before the final decision, Sarah invited me to her apartment in the Clarksville neighborhood. It was a beautiful space with exposed brick walls and large windows that overlooked the city skyline. She had opened a bottle of wine, an expensive Pinot Noir she said she had been saving for a special occasion. We sat on her balcony, watching the sunset paint the Austin skyline in shades of orange and pink, the air thick with humidity and the sound of cicadas. The wine flowed freely that evening, and with it came my guard tumbling down. The stress of 22 weeks of competition, the anxiety about the upcoming decision, and the simple exhaustion of maintaining a professional facade for so long all combined to make me unusually open and unguarded. I complained about everything that had been building up inside me. I vented about our team leader, Robert Davidson, and his tendency to take credit for our work. I made an inappropriate joke about how maybe the real way to get ahead at Innovate Tech was to sleep with the right executives rather than to work yourself to death. It was a tasteless comment, born from frustration and too much alcohol, but Sarah laughed and encouraged me to continue. She kept refilling my glass, asking leading questions, creating an atmosphere where I felt safe to say anything. Then I started talking about my personal life, about my relationship with Marcus, my boyfriend of 5 years. Marcus was stable and dependable, but his family dynamics had always been challenging for me. His mother, Helen, was intensely controlling and had never truly accepted me. She made constant passive-aggressive comments about my Korean heritage, suggesting I was too career-focused and not traditional enough. She would make cutting remarks about my appearance, my cooking, my choice to prioritize my career. That night, fueled by alcohol and frustration, I told Sarah everything. I said I was exhausted from dealing with Helen's manipulation, tired of Marcus always taking his mother's side in conflicts, and seriously considering whether the relationship was worth the constant struggle. Finally, I talked about our shared friend circle, the group we had built together over years of social gatherings and weekend activities. I mentioned that I found Lisa's constant need for validation exhausting, that Tom's political arguments at every gathering had become unbearable, and that sometimes I felt our friendships were more about social obligation than genuine connection. These were private thoughts, the kind of honest but unflattering observations that everyone has but never voices. The thoughts that should stay safely locked inside our heads. Sarah listened to all of it with sympathetic expressions and supportive murmurs. She asked probing questions that drew out more details. She validated my feelings and encouraged me to be completely honest. She created an environment of total trust. What I didn't realize was that her phone was in her purse on the table between us, recording every single word I said. Later, she would claim the recording was innocent, that she just wanted to capture a memory of our friendship before everything changed. But I know the truth now. She was already planning exactly how she would use my words against me. She was collecting ammunition, preparing for a betrayal I never saw coming. Friday morning arrived with clear skies and temperatures already climbing toward the 90s. I dressed carefully in my best business suit, a tailored charcoal gray ensemble that made me feel confident and professional. I assumed I would be meeting with David to discuss the promotion, maybe receiving feedback on my final presentation. I never imagined what was actually waiting for me. When I arrived at David's office on the top floor, I immediately knew something was wrong. His secretary wouldn't meet my eyes as she directed me inside. David's usual warm demeanor was completely absent, replaced by an expression of cold disappointment that made my stomach drop. "Please sit down, Jennifer," he said, his voice devoid of the friendliness I was accustomed to. He pressed play on his computer. My voice filled the room, slurred and careless, making those terrible jokes about sleeping my way to the top. The recording continued, playing my complaints about Robert, twisted and edited to sound like I was planning to undermine company leadership. He showed me screenshots of text messages that appeared to show me mocking the company's core values and disparaging my colleagues. The messages were real, but they had been taken completely out of context, arranged to create a narrative that didn't exist. The promotion was immediately withdrawn from consideration, but it was worse than that. Much worse. David informed me that I was being terminated, effective immediately. The company, he explained, couldn't have someone with my attitude in any leadership capacity. He referenced the ethics clause in my employment contract, stating that my crude jokes about sexual advancement created a hostile work environment and violated company policy. He gave me 45 minutes to collect my personal belongings. Security would be escorting me from the building. I tried desperately to explain. I tried to provide context, to explain it was a private conversation fueled by alcohol and frustration, that I didn't actually believe those things. But David had already made his decision. His expression remained impassive as I pleaded my case, unmoved by my explanations or my tears. It wasn't until later that I learned the full story. Sarah had gone to David the previous evening, barely an hour after I had left her apartment. She had presented herself as someone torn between friendship and integrity, someone who had agonized over the decision but ultimately felt she had to come forward. She played him selected portions of the recording, the most damaging parts, carefully edited to remove any context or nuance. She portrayed herself as a concerned colleague who had witnessed a pattern of concerning behavior and felt obligated to report it for the good of the company. The promotion, of course, went to Sarah. I drove home in a state of shock. My entire career packed into 2 cardboard boxes in my trunk. The drive from downtown Austin to my apartment in South Congress should have taken 20 minutes, but I found myself pulling over twice, unable to see through my tears. Everything I had worked for during 9 years at Innovate Tech was gone. Not just gone, but destroyed in a way that would haunt my professional reputation for years to come. When I finally made it home and opened the door to the apartment I shared with Marcus, I found him already there, though he should have been at work. His bags were packed and sitting by the door. The sight of them made my knees weak. Sarah had sent him carefully selected portions of the recording. Not the full context, just the parts where I had complained about his mother and expressed doubts about our relationship. She had edited it masterfully, removing any softening context, making it sound like I had nothing but contempt for his family and was only staying with him out of convenience or habit. Marcus's face was a mixture of hurt and anger. "I called my mother immediately after I heard this," he said, his voice shaking. "She's been right about you all along. You're cold and selfish. You don't understand what family means." He told me that his mother would always be his first priority, and if I couldn't accept that, we had no future together. He had already put down a deposit on a new apartment closer to his parents' house in Cedar Park. He was taking the furniture his family had contributed to our home, which was most of it, leaving me with nearly empty rooms and an apartment lease I couldn't afford on unemployment. I tried to explain, to provide context, to make him understand that everyone has private thoughts and frustrations that don't reflect their true feelings. But Sarah had done her work too well. The poison she had planted was too deep. Marcus left that same evening, and I was alone in an apartment that suddenly felt cavernous and cold, surrounded by the empty spaces where our shared life used to exist. The final blow came 4 days later. An edited version of the recording appeared on social media. Someone, I never discovered who, but I have my suspicions, created an anonymous account and posted the portions of my complaints about our friend group. The segments where I had mentioned Lisa's need for attention and Tom's political rants were there for everyone to see, carefully edited to remove any context or explanation, accompanied by a caption calling me toxic and fake. My phone exploded with messages. Lisa called me crying, saying she thought we were real friends and she had trusted me. Tom sent a long, angry text about how betrayed he felt. One by one, every person in our social circle blocked me on all platforms and cut off all contact. When I tried to explain that everyone has private frustrations, that these were thoughts taken out of context never meant to hurt anyone, nobody wanted to hear it. The damage was absolute and irreversible. Within 96 hours, Sarah had systematically destroyed every major aspect of my life. My career was in ruins, with a termination on my record that would make finding new employment incredibly difficult. My 5-year relationship was over. My entire friend group had abandoned me. My reputation was shattered. I was completely isolated, sitting alone in an apartment I couldn't afford with no job and no one to turn to for support. The depression that followed wasn't the kind you see in movies, where someone is sad but still functional. This was a crushing, physical weight that made getting out of bed feel like an impossible task. For nearly 4 weeks, I barely left my apartment. I survived on delivery food ordered through apps, watching my savings account dwindle with each transaction. I would lie awake at night, replaying every moment of that evening on Sarah's balcony, trying to understand how someone I trusted so completely, someone I loved like family, could betray me so thoroughly and systematically. The betrayal hurt worse than losing the promotion, Worse than losing Marcus, worse than anything I had experienced before. Sarah had been my closest confidant for 9 years. She had been there for every major moment of my adult life. She had held me when I cried, celebrated with me when I succeeded, and supported me through every challenge. Or at least I thought she had. Looking back now, I wonder how much of it was genuine and how much was strategic positioning, building trust that she could later exploit. But somewhere around the 5th week, something shifted inside me. The grief and depression began to crystallize into something harder, colder, and far more dangerous. Anger. Not the hot, explosive kind that burns out quickly, but cold, calculated fury that sharpened my thoughts and gave me a terrible clarity of purpose. Sarah had methodically destroyed every aspect of my life. She had planned it carefully, executed it flawlessly, and was now enjoying the rewards of her betrayal. She had the executive position she wanted, the salary and stock options that could make her a millionaire. She had the respect of our former colleagues. She had everything she wanted, achieved by destroying me completely. I decided that she would pay for what she had done. Not with violence or anything that would land me in prison, but with the same systematic destruction she had inflicted on me. I would take apart her life piece by piece, using everything I knew about her vulnerabilities, her secrets, and her carefully maintained image. If she could weaponize my trust against me, then I would do exactly the same to her. I wasn't a criminal. I had never planned anything remotely like this before. But I had one massive advantage. I knew Sarah better than anyone else in the world. 9 years of deep friendship meant I knew every secret she had ever shared with me, every insecurity she tried to hide from others, and every skeleton carefully hidden in her closet. She had trusted me with things she had never told anyone else, intimate details of her life that she assumed would always remain confidential. She was about to learn that trust, once broken, becomes a weapon that can be turned against its original owner. I started with her most carefully guarded secret, the one she had made me swear multiple times to never reveal to anyone. For the past 4 years, Sarah had been having an affair with Daniel Thornton, a married senior director at a competing technology firm called Data Stream Solutions. Daniel was married to Catherine, a successful architect, and they had 3 children together, twin boys aged 7 and a daughter aged 10. Sarah had met Daniel at an industry conference in San Francisco 4 years ago. The attraction had been immediate and intense. They had started the affair that same weekend, and it had continued ever since. What made it especially damaging was that Sarah knew Catherine personally. They had met at multiple industry networking events. They had even collaborated on a charity fundraiser together. Sarah had looked Catherine in the eye, complimented her work, and asked about her children, all while sleeping with her husband 4 times a week in a luxury apartment Daniel maintained downtown, specifically for their rendezvous. Sarah had always rationalized the affair to me during our countless conversations about it. She would insist that Daniel was miserable in his marriage, that Catherine was emotionally distant and controlling, that they were only staying together for the sake of the children. She convinced herself that she was actually providing Daniel with emotional support he desperately needed but wasn't receiving at home. She talked constantly about Daniel leaving Catherine once the youngest child reached middle school, once his stock options fully vested, once the market conditions were right. There was always another reason to wait, always another excuse. But Sarah clung desperately to the fantasy that someday they would be together publicly and legitimately. I had kept this secret faithfully for 4 years, despite having serious moral reservations about the situation. I had listened to her complaints about being the other woman, the frustration of canceled plans and lonely holidays. I had consoled her when Daniel chose his family over her for the 100th time. I had held her while she cried about another anniversary spent alone. But that loyalty was completely gone now, burned away by the magnitude of her betrayal. I spent 3 weeks meticulously gathering evidence. I went through 4 years of archived text messages between Sarah and me, where she had sent me dozens of screenshots of her conversations with Daniel. She had shared photos from their secret romantic getaways, including a particularly revealing weekend trip to Napa Valley, where Daniel had told Catherine he was attending a client conference. I found receipts from the expensive restaurants where they celebrated their anniversaries, from the jewelry stores where Daniel had bought Sarah gifts, and from the apartment complex where they met regularly. I had access to all of this because Sarah had trusted me completely. She had shared every detail of her secret life, believing that our friendship meant her secrets would always be safe with me. She had been wrong. Once I had compiled everything into a comprehensive, organized digital folder with dates, locations, photos, and messages, I created an anonymous email account using a VPN service to hide my identity. I sent everything to Catherine with a brief note explaining that I knew this information would be devastating, but I felt she deserved to know the truth about her husband's 4-year deception. I included specific details that made it clear this wasn't some random accusation, but documented, undeniable fact. The response exceeded even my most optimistic expectations. Catherine wasn't the quiet, emotionally distant woman Sarah had described in her self-serving rationalizations. She was a fierce, successful professional who approached Daniel's betrayal with the strategic precision of a military campaign. Catherine didn't just confront Daniel privately or file for divorce quietly. She made it spectacularly, devastatingly public. She created a detailed website documenting the entire affair. She posted the text messages, the photos from romantic getaways, the receipts from expensive gifts and hotels. She included screenshots of conversations where Daniel had lied to her about his whereabouts, claiming to be at business meetings while actually being with Sarah. She named both Daniel and Sarah publicly, tagged their professional networks on LinkedIn, and shared links across every social media platform she could access. The website went viral within 72 hours. It was shared thousands of times across social media, with people commenting on the brazenness of the 4-year affair and the calculated deception of both participants. Professional contacts who had respected both Sarah and Daniel now saw them in a completely different light. The comments sections became forums for people sharing their own experiences with infidelity and praising Catherine for her courage and transparency. Sarah's carefully cultivated professional image shattered overnight. Colleagues at Innovate Tech who had congratulated her on the promotion now looked at her with open disgust. The Austin tech community, which is surprisingly small and interconnected despite the city's growth, was talking about her, but not about her professional accomplishments or innovative ideas. She became known as the woman who had conducted a 4-year affair with a married father of 3, who had befriended his wife while sleeping with her husband for years. I watched it all unfold from behind my computer screen, tracking every share, every comment, every public reaction. For the first time since my termination, I felt something other than helpless depression and rage. This was working. Sarah was experiencing public humiliation and professional damage, and this was only the beginning of what I had planned. But I also felt something else, something I didn't expect and didn't want to acknowledge. A dark, hollow satisfaction that frightened me with its intensity. Sarah's career was next on my systematic list. The scandal with Daniel had severely damaged her reputation, but she still maintained her position and her new executive title at Innovate Tech. I needed to take that away from her, to make her experience the same professional devastation and humiliation I had endured. Innovate Tech had built its brand identity around progressive values and ethical leadership. David Richardson had carefully cultivated the company's public image through extensive social media presence, community involvement programs, and a well-publicized zero-tolerance policy for behavior that reflected poorly on the organization. The company's reputation was one of its most valuable assets in the competitive Austin tech market. I created a sophisticated fake social media account in Sarah's name. I spent 4 weeks building it carefully and methodically, using photos I had collected of her over our 9 years of friendship. I gradually purchased followers through legitimate-seeming services to make the account appear established rather than suddenly created. I studied her actual posting style, her language patterns, her interests and topics, and replicated them carefully on the fake account. To anyone examining it casually, it appeared to be a legitimate secondary personal account that Sarah maintained. Then I began posting content designed to damage her professionally. I started slowly and subtly at first, just controversial opinions that pushed against Innovate Tech's stated values. Comments on political and social issues that directly contradicted the company's public positions. Dismissive remarks about diversity and inclusion initiatives. Casual use of language that could be interpreted as discriminatory or offensive. Each post was carefully calibrated to be offensive enough to generate complaints, but just plausible enough that someone might believe Sarah actually wrote it. I escalated gradually over 3 weeks, carefully managing the pace. The posts became increasingly aggressive and clearly violated the company's published code of conduct. I made comments that appeared to mock clients and customers, disparaged competitors in unprofessional ways, and showed obvious contempt for the very values Innovate Tech claimed to embody in all their marketing materials. People began reporting the account to Innovate Tech's HR department. Colleagues from the company saw the posts and were genuinely horrified. Some reached out to the fake account asking if Sarah was experiencing some kind of crisis, and I carefully ignored these messages. Others immediately reported the account to HR with screenshots, expressing serious concern about having someone with these views in an executive leadership position. Simultaneously, I composed an anonymous letter to Innovate Tech's HR department using sophisticated software that prevented tracing. I claimed to be a concerned colleague who had personally witnessed Sarah making inappropriate and discriminatory comments in the office environment. I described specific incidents that sounded entirely plausible but were completely fabricated. I claimed she had made discriminatory jokes during team meetings, created a hostile environment for certain employees based on their backgrounds, and showed a consistent pattern of behavior that the fake social media account seemed to confirm perfectly. The letter was expertly crafted to sound legitimate and concerned rather than vindictive. I referenced specific company policies by their exact numbers, used the proper corporate terminology and language, and made it crystal clear that I was genuinely frightened to come forward publicly because of Sarah's new position of power in the organization. I suggested that multiple other employees felt the same way, but were too intimidated by her authority to speak up themselves. HR had no choice but to take the letter seriously and launch an investigation. Combined with the social media posts that dozens of people had now reported, combined with the recent public scandal involving Daniel Thornton, they had what appeared to be a clear and concerning pattern of unethical behavior and poor judgment. Sarah was called into a formal meeting with HR leadership and David Richardson himself on a Wednesday afternoon. By Friday morning, she had been terminated from Innovate Tech. I later learned the details through Robert Davidson, our former team leader, who posted vaguely about the situation on LinkedIn without naming names but with enough context that anyone who knew the situation could read between the lines. Sarah had apparently insisted desperately that the social media account was fake, that she never made those comments in the office, that someone was deliberately framing her. But she couldn't prove any of it. The account looked completely legitimate with its established history. The anonymous letter was convincing and detailed, and her recent public scandal with Daniel had already destroyed her credibility. Innovate Tech couldn't take the risk of keeping her employed, especially in a high-profile executive role that represented the company publicly. Sarah lost the promotion she had destroyed my entire career to obtain. She lost the $200,000 salary, the valuable stock options, and the professional respect she had craved. She lost everything in less than 4 months after stealing it all from me. The satisfaction I felt was overwhelming and intoxicating. I had successfully leveled the playing field. We were both unemployed now, both professionally damaged and tainted, both forced to start over from absolutely nothing. But I wasn't finished, not even close. Sarah's professional life was completely in ruins, her reputation destroyed throughout the Austin tech community, but she still maintained her personal relationships and support systems. She still had people who cared about her while I had been left completely isolated. I needed to take that final comfort away from her too, to make her feel the same devastating loneliness I had experienced. Besides the affair with Daniel, Sarah had been casually dating a man named Andrew Mitchell for about 6 months. Andrew was quiet, introverted, and worked as a data scientist at a pharmaceutical research company. He was the complete opposite of Daniel in every way. Stable, honest, uncomplicated, and emotionally available. Sarah had told me multiple times during our friendship that Andrew was her safety net, the stable relationship she maintained in case Daniel never actually left his wife. She didn't love him with the same intensity she felt for Daniel, but she genuinely cared about him and valued the normalcy and stability he provided in her otherwise chaotic double life. Andrew was a private person who avoided social media almost entirely. He had no Facebook, no Instagram, no Twitter or TikTok. His only online presence was a basic LinkedIn profile for professional networking and his work email. This social media avoidance meant he was completely unaware of the public scandal involving Daniel Thornton and Catherine, which worked absolutely perfectly for my purposes. I had met Andrew several times at Sarah's social gatherings, and through our conversations, I had learned he was deeply insecure about romantic relationships. His previous girlfriend had cheated on him repeatedly before their breakup, leaving him with significant trust issues and anxiety about being deceived again. Sarah knew all about his insecurities and had always been extremely careful to hide the entire Daniel situation from him completely. She maintained a carefully constructed image of being faithful, committed, and honest in their relationship. I created another sophisticated anonymous email account and began sending carefully crafted messages to Andrew. The first several messages were subtle and indirect, just gentle hints that Sarah might not be exactly who he thought she was. I sent him links to Catherine's website documenting the affair, making sure to carefully highlight the detailed timeline spanning 4 years and the shocking extent of Sarah's deception and manipulation. I followed up with actual text message screenshots that Sarah had sent me over the years during our friendship. Messages where she talked about Andrew in dismissive, almost contemptuous terms, calling him boring but safe and stable. Messages where she made it abundantly clear he was nothing more than a placeholder relationship while she waited patiently for Daniel to leave his family. Messages where she bragged about the expensive gifts Daniel bought her while Andrew was paying for their modest dates with his carefully budgeted money. Messages that showed exactly how little Sarah actually valued the relationship Andrew thought they were genuinely building together. I sent these devastating revelations gradually over 4 weeks, carefully spacing them out so Andrew had adequate time to process each new piece of information before receiving the next blow. I monitored Sarah's social media presence from a distance and watched as her Instagram posts became noticeably less frequent and increasingly stressed. She posted vague messages about dealing with difficult situations, about betrayal from unexpected sources, and about needing to focus on herself and her mental health. Then I created sophisticated fake evidence suggesting ongoing infidelity. Using photos Sarah had posted publicly on her social media accounts, I created convincing fake text message screenshots suggesting she was still secretly in contact with Daniel despite the massive public scandal, still meeting him clandestinely, still choosing him over Andrew repeatedly. The forgeries were extremely convincing, including realistic timestamps, accurate battery level percentages, and authentic-looking phone interfaces that match Sarah's actual device. After 6 weeks of systematic anonymous messages revealing betrayal after betrayal, Andrew finally reached his breaking point. Sarah posted on her Instagram account about heartbreak and devastating betrayal, about how sometimes people are completely unable to see the truth even when it's directly in front of them. She never mentioned Andrew by name in the post, but I knew immediately. He had ended the relationship, completely unable to trust her after everything he had learned about her deception and manipulation. I felt another surge of dark satisfaction deep in my chest. Sarah was now experiencing the same romantic devastation and abandonment I had felt when Marcus walked out of our shared apartment. She was alone, heartbroken, and abandoned by someone who had once cared deeply about her. The symmetry felt perfect and just. Sarah's professional life was completely destroyed. Her romantic relationships were in absolute ruins. But she still had her apartment, her independence, and her basic ability to start rebuilding her life from scratch. I needed to take away that final security, to leave her as vulnerable and desperate as she had left me after my termination. Sarah lived in a modern apartment in the East Austin area, one of the city's rapidly gentrifying and increasingly expensive neighborhoods. She had moved there 18 months ago, attracted by the trendy restaurants, active nightlife, and social prestige of the address. But I knew from countless intimate conversations over the years that she was living significantly beyond her actual means. Her rent was $3,200 monthly, and she had been barely managing the payments even when she had her substantial Innovate Tech salary. Sarah had confided in me years earlier that she had been late on rent payments multiple times, accruing late fees and warnings from her landlord. She had also maxed out 3 different credit cards over time, carrying a combined balance of over $55,000 between them at interest rates exceeding 20%. She was living a carefully curated Instagram lifestyle she couldn't actually afford, maintaining expensive appearances while drowning in steadily accumulating debt. With her executive promotion and salary increase, she would have finally had the financial breathing room she desperately needed. Without that income, she was in immediate and serious financial trouble. Her landlord was a man named Robert Chang. I found his contact information through public property records and sent him an anonymous email carefully crafted to appear to be from a legitimate credit monitoring service. I included professionally formatted but completely fabricated financial reports, suggesting that Sarah had recently made large purchases on credit despite having no income and was showing multiple signs of serious financial instability and impending default. I strongly implied that she represented a high risk for defaulting on rent payments in the immediate future. I also began systematically spreading carefully worded rumors and concerns among her apartment neighbors. I created yet another fake social media account and posted in the building's residents' Facebook group about concerns regarding Sarah's mental stability and increasingly erratic behavior. I referenced the very public scandal with Daniel and Catherine, subtly suggested she had been acting unstably, and carefully implied that she might represent a potential liability or safety risk to the building community. I never said anything explicitly actionable or provably false, but I planted persistent seeds of concern, fear, and distrust. Other residents began complaining to the building management company about Sarah. Some complaints were based on legitimate concerns from people who had read about the scandal online and felt uncomfortable. Others were more performative, people eagerly jumping on a social bandwagon to ostracize someone who had become a community pariah. Robert Chang, wanting desperately to avoid any potential legal issues and genuinely concerned about the financial risk Sarah now represented, issued her a formal eviction notice. Legally, he couldn't evict her solely based on rumors and social media posts, but he found technical violations in her lease agreement. Alleged unauthorized overnight guests, accumulated noise complaints from neighbors, and minor maintenance issues she had failed to report properly. The eviction wasn't entirely legal and could probably have been challenged successfully, but Sarah was in absolutely no position to fight it. She had no money for a lawyer, and her reputation was so thoroughly destroyed that she couldn't find anyone willing to support or defend her publicly. Sarah had 60 days to find a new apartment and move out. But with no job, severely damaged credit, and a now notorious reputation throughout Austin, no landlord would seriously consider renting to her. She moved from her beautiful, trendy apartment into a series of temporary living situations. She stayed with various acquaintances who still maintained some contact with her, sleeping on uncomfortable couches and in cramped spare rooms, each host eventually asking her to leave when she couldn't contribute financially, or when they simply grew tired of her presence and drama. The final piece of my revenge fell naturally into place without much additional effort from me. Our former mutual friend group, the same people who had completely abandoned me after Sarah leaked my private conversations to social media, began systematically distancing themselves from her. They had witnessed what she had done to me, and now they were watching everything that was happening to her. Some people interpreted it as karma finally working. Others simply didn't want to be publicly associated with someone whose life was falling apart so spectacularly and publicly. Sarah tried desperately to reach out to them, to explain her situation, to maintain those important social connections. But the same social dynamics and fears that had turned everyone against me so quickly now worked against her with equal force. Nobody wanted to be the person defending Sarah Mitchell, the woman who had conducted a 4-year affair with a married father and gotten publicly exposed. Nobody wanted to risk their own social reputation by visible association with her. I watched Sarah's social media presence decline steadily and then collapse entirely. The woman who had once posted multiple times daily about her exciting life, her professional accomplishments, and her social activities now posted only rarely, with increasingly vague messages about perseverance, inner strength, and overcoming adversity. Her posts received fewer and fewer likes and comments as her follower count steadily dropped, until she eventually stopped posting altogether and her accounts went dark. I had systematically taken everything from her. Her career and professional reputation, her romantic relationships, her home and financial stability, her social support system and friendships. Sarah was left with absolutely nothing, forced to move back to her parents' house in suburban Houston at age 33, exactly as she had left me with nothing 9 months earlier. The symmetry felt complete and satisfying. The revenge was fully achieved. For approximately 8 weeks after completing my revenge, I felt genuinely victorious and vindicated. I had definitively shown Sarah that she couldn't systematically destroy someone's entire life without facing serious consequences. I had proven to myself that I wasn't weak or helpless, that I could fight back effectively, that I could systematically dismantle everything she valued and held dear just as she had done to me. The satisfaction was powerful and real. But something began to shift and change around week 9. I found myself obsessively checking Sarah's dormant social media accounts multiple times daily, desperately looking for any signs of her continued suffering or struggles. I would spend hours analyzing any rare post she made, any comment from the few people who still followed her, trying to gauge her current emotional state and level of misery. The revenge had transformed into a genuine addiction, and I needed constant confirmation that she was still hurting, still suffering, still paying for what she had done. During this time, I had managed to secure a new position at a smaller technology company called TechBridge Austin, working as a senior project coordinator. It was a significant professional step down from my previous position at Innovate Tech, both in title prestige and compensation. I was making $105,000 annually instead of the $160,000 I had been earning before my termination. But it was employment, it was income, and I desperately needed to start rebuilding my shattered professional life. The serious problem was that I couldn't focus properly on building this new opportunity or performing well in my role. During important team meetings, I would find my mind drifting to thoughts about what Sarah might be doing at that exact moment. While working on critical projects with tight deadlines, I would catch myself imagining her struggling to find any employment, feeling that familiar dark satisfaction again. I was supposed to be moving forward with my life and career, but I was completely stuck in the past, unhealthily obsessed with her continued downfall and suffering. My performance reviews at TechBridge were consistently mediocre at best. My direct supervisor, Linda Martinez, noted in written reviews that I seemed perpetually distracted and emotionally disconnected from the work. She observed that I had obvious potential but wasn't living up to it, that I seemed far more interested in my phone and personal matters than in the projects we were developing. She wasn't wrong in her assessment. Every spare moment, every break, every quiet period, I was compulsively checking Sarah's accounts, searching for updates, feeding my unhealthy obsession. About 5 months into my extended revenge campaign, something completely unexpected happened. Andrew Mitchell, Sarah's ex-boyfriend, whom I had systematically turned against her, reached out to me directly. He had found my contact information through our mutual LinkedIn connections and sent me a carefully worded message expressing his sympathies for what Sarah had done to me at Innovate Tech. Andrew and I began exchanging messages, then progressed to phone conversations, then eventually started meeting for coffee at various locations around Austin. He was genuinely thoughtful and kind, and we naturally bonded over our shared experience of being deceived and manipulated by Sarah. He told me in detail about the anonymous messages he had received, about the shocking evidence of Sarah's 4-year affair and her dismissive comments about him. I listened with carefully practiced sympathy and understanding, never once revealing that I had been the person sending all those messages and creating that evidence. After several weeks of casual meetings and increasingly personal conversations, Andrew asked me out on a proper romantic date. I immediately agreed, viewing it as the ultimate victory in my campaign against Sarah. Not only had I successfully destroyed her relationship with Andrew, but now I was claiming him for myself. The symmetry felt poetic and perfect. She had taken Marcus from me, and now I had taken Andrew from her and made him mine. We went to an upscale Italian restaurant in the Warehouse District, the kind of establishment with white linen tablecloths, an extensive wine list, and prices that made you think carefully about every order. It should have been romantic and promising, a genuine chance to start something new and healthy with someone who truly understood what I had been through. But I couldn't stop talking about Sarah. I kept pointing out all the specific ways she had deceived and manipulated him, constantly reminding him of every hurtful thing she had said about him, and spent most of the expensive dinner analyzing her psychology, her motivations, and her patterns of behavior. Andrew tried repeatedly to steer our conversation toward other topics. He asked thoughtful questions about my interests, my goals for the future, my life and identity beyond my complicated history with Sarah. But I kept circling back obsessively to her, completely unable to let go of the subject that had utterly consumed my life for months. I desperately needed him to validate my revenge, to confirm repeatedly that Sarah deserved everything I had orchestrated happening to her. We went on 4 more dates over the following weeks, and every single one followed the exact same dysfunctional pattern. Andrew would try earnestly to get to know me as a complete person with interests and dreams, and I would systematically turn every conversation back to Sarah and her betrayal. On our 5th date, he finally confronted me directly about the problem. He said he had genuinely hoped we could build something meaningful together, but he had come to realize that I wasn't actually interested in him as a person or partner. I was interested in him as a trophy, as tangible proof of my victory over Sarah, as another weapon in my ongoing war against her. He was completely right, of course. I hadn't developed any genuine romantic feelings for Andrew at all. I hadn't been trying authentically to get to know him or build a real connection. I had been cynically using him as another weapon against Sarah, another way to prove to myself that I had won our war. Andrew ended things that night, telling me kindly but very firmly that I needed to seriously work through my issues before I could possibly have a healthy relationship with anyone. Andrew's rejection hit me much harder than I had expected or prepared for. I had convinced myself that I was successfully moving forward, that I was productively rebuilding my life while Sarah's crumbled around her. But the truth Andrew forced me to confront was stark and painful. I had been standing completely still, firmly anchored to my need for revenge and validation, while life moved on around me and left me behind. At TechBridge, my work performance continued its steady decline. I missed important project deadlines, delivered consistently subpar work, and failed to meaningfully engage with my team members. Linda pulled me into her office for a formal performance review meeting, expressing serious concern about my trajectory with the company. She said she understood I was going through an obviously difficult personal time, but the company needed employees who were present, engaged, and committed to their work. She officially placed me on a 90-day performance improvement plan with specific, measurable goals. I genuinely tried to focus and improve. I wanted desperately to do better, to prove I could still be the competent professional I had once been. But every single time I sat down to work on a project or attend a meeting, my mind would inevitably drift to Sarah. I would wonder obsessively if she had found any employment yet, if she was still living with her parents in Houston, if she was still suffering as much as I wanted her to be suffering. The obsession had become genuinely pathological and was destroying what remained of my life. I started experiencing severe insomnia. I would lie awake for hours every night, my mind endlessly replaying everything I had done to Sarah, then replaying everything she had done to me, locked in an exhausting cycle of justification and unexpected guilt. I lost a significant amount of weight, not from any intentional diet or exercise, but from frequently forgetting to eat, too absorbed in my obsession to remember basic self-care and survival needs. My apartment, the same one I had shared with Marcus before Sarah's betrayal destroyed that relationship, became a physical manifestation of my deteriorating mental state. Dishes piled up in the sink for weeks. Mail went unopened, accumulating in stacks on my counter. I stopped decorating or maintaining it because what was the point? I was just existing in the space, not living, trapped in a prison entirely of my own creation. The genuine turning point in my psychological unraveling came on a rainy Saturday afternoon in November, approximately 10 months after I had started my systematic revenge campaign. I was walking through the South Congress shopping district, ostensibly looking for groceries, but really just wandering aimlessly through my day, when I saw her. Sarah was sitting alone at a small coffee shop, the kind of place we used to visit together regularly after weekend shopping trips years ago. She was staring at her phone screen, but her eyes were completely unfocused, seeing nothing at all. She looked utterly exhausted. Her hair, which she had always maintained so meticulously with regular salon visits, was pulled back in a simple, messy ponytail. She wore plain jeans and a faded sweatshirt instead of the carefully curated, fashionable outfits she had always prided herself on. But what struck me most powerfully was her face and expression. The confident, charismatic Sarah I had known for 9 years was completely gone. In her place sat a woman who looked defeated, hollow, and profoundly alone. She looked exactly how I felt inside. I watched her for several long minutes from behind a produce stand across the street. She ordered another coffee, paid with what appeared to be a handful of crumpled small bills, and went back to staring at nothing. A few people walked past her table, and I saw her face brighten hopefully for just a moment, as if maybe someone had recognized her and would stop to talk. But nobody did. She was invisible, alone in a crowded public space. I had desperately wanted this exact moment. I had systematically created this complete destruction of everything she had been. This was my victory, my revenge, my justice finally delivered. So why did I feel so completely empty inside? Why did seeing her suffering bring me no satisfaction at all? I left the shopping district without approaching her or making my presence known, but I couldn't stop thinking about what I had witnessed. That night, I did something I had been carefully avoiding for months. I looked in the mirror in my bathroom, really looked at myself. The woman staring back was a stranger I barely recognized. I had lost 25 pounds. My skin was pale from spending all my time indoors, and my eyes had the exact same hollow look I had seen in Sarah's face that afternoon. I had set out to systematically destroy Sarah, and I had succeeded completely. But in the process, I had destroyed myself just as thoroughly. The revenge I had pursued so obsessively had poisoned every single aspect of my life. I had no real friendships, no romantic prospects, a struggling career that was barely holding together, and absolutely no sense of purpose beyond hurting someone who had hurt me first. That moment in the coffee shop, seeing Sarah's hollow expression, was the beginning of a long, painful process of self-examination and rebuilding. I started seeing a therapist, Dr. Michelle Chen, who specialized in trauma recovery and obsessive behavioral patterns. In our very first session, I told her absolutely everything: what Sarah had done to me at Innovate Tech, and what I had done to her in methodical return. Dr. Chen didn't judge me or express shock at my actions. Instead, she helped me understand the destructive psychological cycle of revenge and why it's ultimately self-destructive for the person seeking it. She explained that when someone seriously hurts us, we essentially have two fundamental choices. We can focus our energy on rebuilding ourselves, or we can focus our energy on destroying them. The critical problem is that destruction requires constant energy and attention. It becomes an all-consuming mission that actively prevents us from moving forward with our own lives. She said something during that first session that stuck with me powerfully. Revenge is drinking poison and expecting the other person to die. Sarah had betrayed me terribly, and she had absolutely deserved consequences for her calculated actions. But by making her complete destruction my entire purpose and identity, I had poisoned my own life just as thoroughly as she had poisoned hers with her initial betrayal. I began to genuinely work on myself, truly work on rebuilding my life and identity for the first time since my termination. I focused intently on my performance at TechBridge, determined to meet every goal of my improvement plan. I forced myself to be present in meetings, to engage authentically with projects, to think about the actual work rather than obsessing about Sarah. It was incredibly difficult at first. My mind would automatically drift back to her constantly, and I had to consciously redirect my thoughts dozens of times each day. Slowly, incrementally, I began to reclaim my life from the obsession that had consumed it. I started exercising regularly, joining a gym and attending yoga classes that helped me reconnect with my body. I forced myself to cook proper meals and maintain my apartment. I reached out cautiously to a few people from my past, not the friend group Sarah and I had shared, but people I had lost touch with over the years as my friendship with Sarah became all-consuming. Some responded positively, some didn't, but I was slowly rebuilding social connections beyond my obsession. I stopped checking Sarah's social media entirely. This was by far the hardest part of my recovery, genuinely like breaking a powerful addiction. I would feel the compulsive urge constantly, especially in quiet moments when I was alone. But I would resist, reminding myself repeatedly that my worth and identity weren't defined by her suffering or struggles. I eventually blocked all her accounts so I physically couldn't look even if I wanted to. I needed to completely sever that connection to have any hope of recovery. After 7 months of a consistent therapy and genuine effort at work, things began to noticeably improve at TechBridge. My performance reviews showed marked improvement, and Linda publicly praised my recent project work during a team meeting. I received a modest raise and was formally taken off the performance improvement plan. It wasn't the career I had imagined building at Innovate Tech, but it was something I had earned through my own efforts, not through destroying someone else. I came to realize that what Sarah had taken from me at Innovate Tech wasn't just a job or a promotion. It was my entire identity. I had defined myself completely by my career success, by my impressive title and salary and professional reputation. When she destroyed that external identity, I felt like I had lost myself entirely. But the truth was more nuanced than that. She had taken away the external markers of success, but she hadn't taken away my skills, my intelligence, my experience, or my capacity to rebuild from scratch. The revenge I had pursued so obsessively was an attempt to restore that external validation by destroying hers. But validation achieved through someone else's destruction is hollow and meaningless. It doesn't actually make you feel better about yourself. It just temporarily distracts you from your own pain and emptiness. 14 months after my termination from Innovate Tech, I unexpectedly ran into Robert Davidson, my old supervisor, at an industry networking event downtown. I almost avoided him entirely, embarrassed by how my tenure there had ended so dramatically. But he saw me and approached with a genuinely friendly smile. We talked for quite a while, catching up on professional developments and industry changes. Eventually, he brought up Sarah, and I braced myself for the conversation. But what he told me surprised me. Sarah had recently been hired at a small startup company, doing basic entry-level work for significantly less money than she had been making at Innovate Tech. She had been forced to move back to her parents' house in suburban Houston, starting her career over from scratch at 33 years old. Robert said something that struck me deeply and made me profoundly uncomfortable. He said that what Sarah had done to me was terrible and indefensible, but what had happened to her seemed disproportionate to the original crime. He understood my anger completely. but he thought the public destruction she had experienced went far beyond reasonable consequences for betraying a colleague and competitor. He didn't know I was personally responsible for most of what had happened to her, but his words made me deeply uncomfortable and forced me to confront questions I had been avoiding. Was he right? Had I gone too far in my revenge? Sarah had betrayed me cruelly and deliberately, using my most private vulnerabilities against me for her own advancement. She had destroyed my career, my relationship, and my reputation without any hesitation or remorse. Didn't she deserve exactly what she got? But I couldn't shake the image of her sitting alone in that coffee shop, completely hollowed out and defeated. I had wanted her to feel the same pain I felt, to understand what she had done to me. But had I simply perpetuated a vicious cycle of cruelty? Had I become exactly the same kind of person she was? Someone willing to methodically destroy another human being for personal satisfaction and revenge? It's been almost 3 years since Sarah betrayed me, and 26 months since I completed my systematic revenge campaign. I'm still at TechBridge, now promoted to senior project manager with a salary of $135,000. It's not what I had at Innovate Tech, and it's certainly not the executive position I lost, but it's respectable and meaningful, and I earned it through genuine work rather than destruction. I'm still seeing Dr. Chen regularly for therapy. We've worked through substantial amounts of the trauma from both Sarah's initial betrayal and my own subsequent actions. I've come to understand and accept that both things can simultaneously be true. Sarah was wrong to betray me so calculatedly, and I was wrong to pursue such comprehensive, systematic revenge. Her actions didn't justify mine, even if they helped explain them. I've started cautiously dating again. Nothing serious yet, but I'm slowly learning to trust people again, to be genuinely vulnerable without constantly expecting betrayal. It's a slow, difficult process, but I'm making real progress. I've also rebuilt some friendships, though not with the old group Sarah and I shared. Those bridges are burned permanently, casualties of the war between us. Sometimes I still wonder about Sarah. Is she happy back in Houston? Has she managed to rebuild her life? Has she learned anything meaningful from what happened, or does she just see herself as a victim of circumstances beyond her control? I genuinely don't know, and I've learned through therapy that I don't need to know. Her life is no longer my concern or responsibility. The hardest thing to accept is that the revenge I worked so hard to achieve didn't actually heal me at all. It didn't undo Sarah's betrayal or magically restore what I had lost. All it did was create more destruction, more pain, and more wasted time that I can never recover. I spent 10 months of my life focused entirely on hurting someone else instead of healing myself. Those are 10 months I can never get back. People sometimes ask me if I've forgiven Sarah for what she did. The honest answer is complicated and nuanced. I understand intellectually why she did what she did. Intense competition for a major promotion, fear of being passed over, the seductive simplicity of eliminating an obstacle rather than outperforming it fairly. But understanding someone's motivation doesn't erase the harm they caused or make it acceptable. I don't think I'll ever forgive Sarah in the traditional, complete sense. What she did was too calculated, too cruel, too devastating. But I've learned through extensive therapy that forgiveness isn't really about the other person anyway. It's about releasing yourself from the heavy burden of anger and resentment. It's about choosing not to let someone's past actions define your future. In that more nuanced sense, maybe I have forgiven her. Not because she deserves it or has earned it, but because I deserve to be free from the prison of revenge and obsession. I deserve to build a life based on my own values and goals, not on opposition to someone who betrayed me years ago. As for Sarah forgiving me for what I did to her, I genuinely doubt she even knows I was responsible. She probably thinks her life fell apart due to natural consequences of the Daniel affair becoming public. She probably doesn't realize that someone systematically destroyed every aspect of her life with the same methodical precision she used against me. Part of me still wants her to know, to understand that actions have consequences. But a wiser part of me knows that revealing my role would only restart the destructive cycle of pain. If I could go back in time and change things, would I? The question haunts me regularly. Part of me wants to say yes, that I would handle Sarah's betrayal completely differently, that I would focus on rebuilding rather than destroying. But another part of me knows I needed to go through this dark journey to truly understand the cost of revenge. I've learned some painful truths through this experience. First, revenge is a poison that contaminates everything it touches. It promises satisfaction, but delivers only temporary relief followed by emptiness. It demands constant attention and energy, preventing you from moving forward with your life. Second, when someone betrays you, they take something from you. Yes. But whether they take everything depends entirely on how you choose to respond. Sarah took my job, my relationship, and my reputation. But I gave her something far more valuable. 10 months of my life, my peace of mind, and my sense of self. That was my choice, not hers. Third, there's a crucial difference between justice and revenge. Justice would have been exposing Sarah's unethical behavior and getting me fired, perhaps filing a wrongful termination suit, or ensuring her actions had appropriate professional consequences. Revenge was systematically destroying every single aspect of her life, including parts that had nothing to do with what she did to me. Fourth, and perhaps most importantly, you can't destroy someone else without destroying parts of yourself in the process. I became obsessive, cruel, and calculating. I became willing to manipulate and deceive, to create fake evidence and destroy relationships without remorse. I became, in many fundamental ways, exactly what I hated most about Sarah. The philosopher Nietzsche warned that whoever fights monsters should take care not to become a monster themselves. I fought Sarah's betrayal by becoming equally calculating and destructive. In defeating her, I defeated myself. Today, I'm building a life that isn't defined by Sarah's betrayal or my revenge. I'm learning to trust again, to be vulnerable, to invest in relationships without keeping a running tally of who might betray me next. It's harder than pursuing revenge ever was, because it requires genuine courage rather than anger-fueled determination. I volunteer now, mentoring young women in tech who are facing workplace challenges. I share my story of rebuilding after a devastating setback, though I leave out the revenge part. I focus on how I learned to advocate for myself without destroying others, how I found purpose beyond professional success. Sometimes, in quiet moments, I still feel that surge of anger when I think about what Sarah did. I still remember the shock of that recording playing in David's office, the pain of Marcus leaving, the isolation of losing all my friends at once. Those scars don't disappear just because I've chosen not to let them define me. But I've learned to acknowledge the anger without acting on it. I've learned that feeling something doesn't mean I have to do something about it. The anger is valid. Sarah's betrayal was real and devastating. But acting on that anger in destructive ways only creates more pain, more damage, more lives torn apart. One of the most difficult aspects of my journey has been carrying the weight of what I did in complete secrecy. I can never tell anyone the full truth. Not my therapist, Dr. Chen, to whom I confess some of my actions, but not all. Not my new friends, who know me as someone who rebuilt after betrayal but don't know I became the betrayer in return. Not my family, who watched me struggle through depression but never understood the darkness I embraced. There are moments when the burden of these secrets feels unbearable. I'll be at a social gathering, laughing with new friends, and suddenly I'll remember the fake social media accounts I created, the fabricated evidence I manufactured, the anonymous messages I sent to destroy someone's relationships. The cognitive dissonance is overwhelming. How can I be this person who values honesty and integrity while carrying such calculated deception in my past? I've learned that revenge doesn't just poison your present, it contaminates your future. Every new relationship I build is shadowed by what I'm capable of. Every time someone trusts me with a secret or vulnerability, I remember how I weaponized Sarah's trust. Every time I'm tempted to judge someone else's ethical failures, I remember my own. Dr. Chen talks about the concept of moral injury, the psychological wound that occurs when we violate our own deeply held moral beliefs. Combat veterans experience it when they're forced to do things in war that contradict their fundamental values. I experienced it through my revenge campaign. I had always believed I was a good person, ethical and principled. The realization that I was capable of such sustained, calculated cruelty shattered that self-image. What I didn't anticipate when I embarked on my revenge was how it would affect innocent people beyond Sarah. Catherine, Daniel's wife, became an unwitting weapon in my campaign. I exposed her husband's affair, yes, but I also destroyed her marriage and traumatized her children. Those 3 kids didn't do anything wrong, but they're growing up in a broken home partly because of my actions. Andrew, Sarah's ex-boyfriend, was another collateral casualty. He was a kind, decent man who had already been hurt by a previous relationship. I cynically manipulated his trauma and insecurities to turn him against Sarah, then used him as a trophy to further hurt her. When he reached out to me seeking genuine connection, I exploited him again. I added another layer of betrayal and hurt to a man who deserved better. Robert Chang, Sarah's landlord, made business decisions based on fraudulent information I provided. The other residents of Sarah's apartment building were manipulated into turning against her based on lies I spread. Even random people on social media who shared and commented on the scandal became unknowing participants in my revenge. I had convinced myself that my war was only with Sarah, that the collateral damage was justified because she started it. But the truth is that revenge radiates outward like poison in water. It touches everyone it reaches, and I contaminated dozens of lives in my pursuit of Sarah's destruction. Sometimes I wonder about the parallel universe where I made different choices. What if, on that first day after my termination, I had chosen to focus on rebuilding rather than destroying? What if I had channeled all that energy and intelligence I used for revenge into advancing my career, developing new skills, building genuine relationships? In that parallel life, I might have found a better job faster. I might have processed my anger and trauma in healthy ways. I might have met someone emotionally available and built a real relationship. I might have discovered that success is the best revenge, that living well is more satisfying than tearing someone else down. But that's not the choice I made. I chose the dark path, and I have to live with the consequences of that choice every single day. I can't go back. I can't undo the harm I caused. I can only try to be better moving forward, to make different choices now, to build a life I'm not ashamed of from this point on. Dr. Chen says that redemption isn't about erasing our past mistakes. It's about learning from them and choosing differently in the future. She says that carrying our shame without letting it define us is one of the hardest challenges humans face. I'm still learning how to do that. My revenge campaign didn't just affect my personal growth. It fundamentally changed my approach to my professional life. At TechBridge, I find myself constantly second-guessing my motivations. When a colleague shares a vulnerability or concern with me, I'm hyper-aware of how I could use that information against them if I wanted to. The knowledge of my own capacity for manipulation makes every professional interaction feel dangerous. I've also become paranoid about my own vulnerabilities. I share very little personal information at work now. I maintain strict professional boundaries that sometimes come across as cold or distant. My coworkers probably think I'm just private, but the truth is I'm terrified of giving anyone ammunition they could use against me. Sarah's betrayal taught me how dangerous trust can be, and my own revenge taught me how easily that trust can be weaponized. This guardedness has limited my professional growth. Leadership positions require building genuine relationships and trust with team members. Mentorship requires openness and vulnerability, but I struggle with both because I'm constantly aware of the risks. My supervisor, Linda, has mentioned this in reviews. She says I'm technically excellent, but need to work on building stronger team connections. She doesn't know why I struggle with this, and I can never tell her. The 1-year anniversary of completing my revenge campaign was particularly difficult. I had marked the date in my calendar without consciously intending to, and when it arrived, I spent the entire day in a state of anxious reflection. I called in sick to work and spent hours sitting on my apartment balcony, replaying everything that had happened. I thought about Sarah sitting in that coffee shop, hollow and alone. I thought about the fake social media accounts I had created, the hours I had spent crafting fake evidence, the satisfaction I had felt watching each phase of her destruction unfold. I thought about how completely consumed I had been by hatred and the need for revenge. I also thought about who I had been before all of this. The Jennifer who started at Innovate Tech 9 years ago had been optimistic, trusting, and genuinely kind. She believed in hard work, integrity, and the basic goodness of people. That Jennifer is gone, destroyed as thoroughly as I destroyed Sarah. In her place is someone harder, more cynical, more damaged. On that anniversary, I wrote a letter to Sarah. I never intended to send it, and I never did. But I needed to put my thoughts on paper, to articulate what I had done and why. In the letter, I confessed everything. Every fake account, every manipulated piece of evidence, every calculated move in my campaign against her. I explained my motivation, though I didn't try to justify it. I acknowledged the harm I had caused to her and to all the collateral victims of my revenge. At the end of the letter, I wrote something I hadn't fully realized until that moment. You destroyed my life, and you deserved consequences for that. But I destroyed my own soul in the process of destroying yours. I don't know which of us paid the higher price. I burned that letter in my sink, watching the paper curl and blacken, watching my confession turn to ash. It felt symbolic, though I'm not sure of what. Maybe it represented the impossibility of redemption. Maybe it represented my commitment to moving forward. Maybe it was just dramatic and meaningless. What I haven't talked much about is the physical toll the revenge campaign took on my body. Beyond the weight loss and insomnia I mentioned earlier, I developed other health problems during that period that I'm still dealing with now. I started having panic attacks for the first time in my life. They would come suddenly, usually when I was alone at night, my heart racing, my chest tight, unable to catch my breath. I would feel convinced I was dying, that my heart was going to give out. The first time it happened, I actually called 911, terrified I was having a heart attack at 29 years old. The EMTs were kind and patient as they explained it was a panic attack, not a cardiac event. They asked if I was under significant stress. I laughed bitterly at the question, which probably concerned them even more. How could I explain that I was under stress of my own creation? That I was systematically destroying someone's life and it was destroying mine in return? The panic attacks became more frequent as the revenge campaign progressed. Sometimes they were triggered by specific events, like seeing something Sarah had posted or hearing that another phase of my plan had succeeded. Other times they came out of nowhere, waking me from sleep or hitting me in the middle of a workday. I also developed chronic tension headaches and jaw pain from grinding my teeth at night. My dentist fitted me with a night guard and asked about stress. I gave vague answers about work pressures and personal challenges. I couldn't tell her that I was grinding my teeth because my subconscious was processing the monstrous things I was doing while my conscious mind rationalized them. Even now, more than 2 years later, I still get panic attacks occasionally. They're less frequent and less severe, but they remind me that trauma lives in the body. My revenge against Sarah traumatized me as much as her betrayal did. Maybe more, because I chose it deliberately and carried it out methodically. Perhaps the hardest part of recovery has been learning to trust myself again. When you discover you're capable of sustained, calculated cruelty, it changes how you see yourself fundamentally. Every day I have to consciously choose to be the person I want to be, rather than the person I proved I could become. In therapy, Dr. Chen and I work on what she calls values alignment. We've identified my core values: integrity, compassion, fairness, honesty. Then we examine my daily choices and behaviors to see if they align with those values. When there's a mismatch, we explore why and work on strategies to close the gap. This process is harder than it sounds. It would be easier to just say, I made a mistake, but that's not who I really am, and move on. But Dr. Chen won't let me do that. She insists that I acknowledge what I did as a real expression of who I was capable of being during that period. The only way to ensure I don't become that person again is to accept that I was that person, understand what led me there, and make conscious choices to be different. We talk a lot about the concept of moral decision points, the moments when you can choose to escalate harm or de-escalate it. In my revenge campaign, I faced dozens of these decision points. Each time I created another fake account, each time I sent another anonymous message, each time I escalated my campaign against Sarah, I had a choice. I chose harm every single time. Now, in my daily life, I try to be hyper-aware of these moral decision points. When I'm angry at someone, I pause and ask myself, am I about to act in alignment with my values, or am I about to harm someone for my own satisfaction? When I have information that could damage someone's reputation, I ask myself, is sharing this necessary and ethical, or am I weaponizing information like I did before? One question I struggle with constantly is whether I have an obligation to disclose my past actions in certain situations. When I'm dating someone and the relationship becomes serious, do I owe them the truth about what I did? When I'm mentoring young women in tech, sharing my story of overcoming betrayal, am I being dishonest by omitting the revenge part? Dr. Chen's position is that I need to balance accountability with self-protection. She says that full disclosure isn't always appropriate or helpful, that I have to use judgment about when my past is relevant to present situations. But she also emphasizes that I can't build genuine intimacy while hiding something this fundamental about my past. I haven't resolved this question yet. I've been on several dates in the past year, but none have progressed to the point where I felt I needed to have that conversation. Part of me wonders if I'm subconsciously sabotaging these relationships before they get serious enough to require disclosure. It's easier to keep things casual than to risk someone seeing me the way I see myself when I look at my darkest moments. Ironically, one positive outcome of going through this dark experience is that I've developed a much deeper capacity for empathy, particularly for people who've made serious mistakes. I used to be fairly judgmental, quick to condemn people for their poor choices. Now I understand how complicated human behavior is, how good people can do terrible things under certain circumstances. When I hear about someone who's done something harmful or destructive, my first reaction now is to wonder about their story. What led them to that point? What pain were they carrying? What choices did they face? I don't excuse harmful behavior, but I understand it better. This empathy extends to Sarah, which is perhaps the strangest development of all. I can now imagine her sitting in David's office, holding that recording, wrestling with the decision of whether to use it against me. I can imagine her fear of being passed over for the promotion, her resentment of my success, her rationalization that she was just doing what she needed to do to advance her career. I still believe what she did was wrong. I still believe she hurt me deliberately and unnecessarily. But I understand her humanity better now. She wasn't a monster. She was a flawed person who made a terrible choice, just like I did in response. We were both human beings who let our worst impulses win, who chose destruction over integrity. This doesn't mean I forgive her or that I want to reconcile, but it means I can see her as a complete person rather than just the villain of my story. And maybe that's growth, even if it came at a terrible price. Was it worth it? Did I get what I wanted when I set out to destroy Sarah's life? On a surface level, yes. I achieved everything I set out to do. I exposed her secrets, destroyed her reputation, ended her relationships, cost her her job, and left her as isolated and desperate as she had left me. I proved that I wasn't helpless, that I could fight back, that actions have consequences. But in the deeper accounting, the one that truly matters, I failed completely. I set out to feel better about what happened to me, to find justice or closure or vindication. Instead, I created a new set of wounds, a new source of shame, and a new set of consequences I'll carry forever. I set out to prove I was strong, but I actually proved I was fragile, that I could be broken so completely by betrayal that I became capable of betraying my own values. I can never undo what I did to Sarah. I can never take back the months of systematic harassment, the fake evidence, the calculated destruction of her life. Those actions are part of my history now, part of who I was during the darkest period of my life. I have to live with that knowledge forever. I have to wake up every morning knowing what I'm capable of, knowing how far I fell, knowing that I have to consciously choose to be better every single day. This story doesn't have a neat ending where I learned my lesson and everything worked out perfectly. Real life doesn't work that way. I'm still dealing with the consequences of my choices, still working through the psychological aftermath, still trying to become someone I can respect again. Some days are better than others. Some days I feel like I've made real progress. Other days I'm right back in that coffee shop, looking at Sarah's hollow eyes and seeing my own reflection. But I am moving forward slowly and imperfectly. I'm building a life based on healthier principles, honesty without weaponizing vulnerability, ambition without destroying competition, relationships built on genuine connection rather than strategic positioning. It's harder than pursuing revenge ever was, because it requires genuine courage rather than anger-fueled determination. It requires facing myself honestly, accepting what I've done, and choosing to be different. If you're reading this because someone betrayed you, because you're considering revenge, because you want to see your enemies suffer the way you're suffering, I understand. I understand that rage better than most people ever will. I understand the obsessive fantasies of making them pay, of watching them hurt, of proving that you're not powerless. I understand the seductive appeal of revenge, the promise that if you just make them suffer enough, you'll finally feel better. But I'm asking you, begging you, to consider the real cost. Not just to them, but to yourself. Not just the practical consequences, but the psychological and moral ones. Revenge will take everything you give it and demand more. It will consume your time, your energy, your mental health. It will become an addiction that's never satisfied, because destroying someone else can never heal what was broken inside you. It will transform you into someone you might not recognize, someone capable of cruelty you never imagined. And when you finally achieve it, when you finally see your enemy broken and suffering, you might discover that the satisfaction is far less than you expected, and the cost far greater than you imagined. You might win the battle and lose yourself in the process. You might achieve perfect revenge and discover that you destroyed your own soul to accomplish it. You might get everything you wanted and realize that what you wanted was poison. The alternative path is harder. It requires facing your pain directly instead of deflecting it onto someone else. It requires rebuilding yourself instead of tearing someone else down. It requires accepting that sometimes people hurt us terribly, and there's no perfect justice, no perfect balance, no way to make things right. It requires living with that injustice and choosing to move forward anyway. But that harder path leads somewhere worth going. It leads to genuine healing instead of hollow satisfaction. It leads to growth instead of destruction. It leads to becoming someone you can respect instead of someone you have to hide from. I'm sharing this story not because I'm proud of what I did. I'm deeply ashamed of it. But because I think it's important to tell the truth about revenge. Our culture glorifies revenge in movies and books and television shows, where the protagonist gets their vengeance and rides off into the sunset, fully vindicated and satisfied. The audience cheers. Justice is served. Everything is resolved. But that's not how it works in real life. In real life, revenge is messy, consuming, and ultimately self-destructive. It promises healing, but delivers only temporary satisfaction followed by emptiness and shame. It claims to restore justice, but only creates more injustice, more pain, more damage radiating outward to innocent people. It offers power, but only reveals how powerless we feel, how much control we've surrendered to our need for retribution. Sarah betrayed me, and that was wrong. She made a calculated decision to destroy my life for her own advancement, and she deserved consequences for that choice. But the comprehensive destruction I inflicted on her went far beyond appropriate consequences. It was revenge, pure and simple, and it cost me almost as much as it cost her. Maybe more, because she probably doesn't even know I was responsible, while I have to live with the full knowledge of what I did. If I could go back and give advice to the version of me sitting in that empty apartment after being fired, devastated, and angry and plotting revenge, what would I say? I've thought about this question countless times. I would tell her that the pain she's feeling is real and valid. Sarah's betrayal was cruel and calculated. The anger she feels is justified. But I would beg her to channel that energy differently. I would tell her to find a lawyer and explore legal options for wrongful termination. I would tell her to document everything and pursue justice through proper channels. I would tell her that exposing unethical behavior is not the same as systematic revenge, that there's a difference between accountability and destruction. I would tell her to invest in therapy immediately, not months later after the damage is done. I would tell her that healing is harder than revenge, but infinitely more rewarding. I would tell her that the best revenge really is living well, building a life so full and meaningful that the person who betrayed you becomes irrelevant. I would tell her that she's about to embark on a path that will fundamentally change who she is, and not in a good way. I would warn her that revenge is addictive, that it starts with one act of retaliation but never stops there. I would tell her that she'll lose herself in the process and spend years trying to find her way back. Most importantly, I would tell her that she has a choice. In this moment of devastation and rage, she has a choice about what kind of person she wants to be. She can be someone who is betrayed and destroyed, or she can be someone who is betrayed and rebuilt. She can let Sarah's actions define her, or she can define herself through her response. But I can't go back. I can only move forward with the knowledge I have now, making better choices, trying to be someone worthy of the second chance I've given myself. One thing I think about often is the legacy of my choices. What kind of impact have my actions had on the world? What ripples have they created? Sarah's children, if she ever has any, will grow up with a mother shaped by trauma and betrayal. Her trust in people has been shattered just as mine was. She'll struggle to form genuine connections, always wondering if people are gathering ammunition to use against her. In that sense, my revenge will echo through generations in ways I never intended. Catherine and Daniel's children are growing up in a broken home. They're dealing with the trauma of their parents' divorce and the public nature of their father's infidelity. They didn't ask to be part of this story, but they're bearing consequences that will affect them for the rest of their lives. Andrew will carry additional trust issues into his next relationship. He was hurt by his ex-wife, then manipulated by me to turn against Sarah, then used as a trophy in my war against her. Each betrayal makes it harder for him to open his heart to someone new. The colleagues who witnessed what happened between Sarah and me learned lessons about workplace relationships. Maybe they learned to be more guarded, to trust less, to view every friendship as potentially strategic. Maybe I contributed to making their workplace more cynical and less collaborative. This is the real cost of revenge that nobody talks about. It's not just about the two people involved. It's about everyone they touch, everyone who witnesses it, everyone affected by the ripples of destruction spreading outward. Going through this experience has taught me some uncomfortable truths about human nature, including my own. First, we're all capable of far more cruelty than we think. I never imagined I could systematically destroy someone's life. I thought of myself as fundamentally good, ethical, principled. But when I was hurt badly enough and angry enough, those principles evaporated. The capacity for cruelty exists in all of us, waiting for the right circumstances to emerge. Second, rationalization is incredibly powerful. Throughout my revenge campaign, I convinced myself I was justified. Sarah started it. She destroyed my life first. I was just evening the score, delivering justice, teaching her a lesson. Our minds are incredibly skilled at creating narratives that excuse our behavior and paint us as the hero of our own story. Third, the line between victim and perpetrator is thinner than we want to believe. I was genuinely Sarah's victim when she betrayed me. But then I became a perpetrator when I retaliated. Both things are true. We want to believe people are either good or bad, victims or villains, but reality is more complex. People can be both at different times, even simultaneously. Fourth, empathy is a choice we have to make consciously. When I was consumed by revenge, I completely lost the ability to empathize with Sarah. I could only see her as a villain, as someone who deserved everything I was doing to her. I had to actively work to recover my empathy, to see her as a flawed human being rather than a monster. Finally, redemption is possible, but not guaranteed. I'm trying to redeem myself, to become someone I can respect again. But redemption isn't something you achieve once and then it's done. It's a daily practice, a constant choice to be better than you were. And even with consistent effort, you can never fully erase what you've done. You can only try to be better going forward. 3 years after Sarah's betrayal and more than 2 years after my revenge campaign ended, I'm still figuring out who I am now. I'm not the person I was before all of this happened. That Jennifer is gone forever. But I'm not the person I became during my darkest period either. I'm someone new, someone still being formed. I'm more cautious now, sometimes too cautious. I struggle to trust people, always wondering about their hidden motives. I analyze interactions for signs of manipulation or betrayal. It's exhausting, and I know it holds me back from forming genuine connections. But it's also protective, a defense mechanism I developed for good reasons. I'm more empathetic to people who've made mistakes, who've let their worst impulses win. I understand how complicated human behavior is, how good people can do terrible things. This empathy makes me a better mentor, a better friend to people struggling with their own demons. But it also means I sometimes excuse behavior I shouldn't, giving people passes they haven't earned. I'm more aware of my own capacity for darkness. I know what I'm capable of when I'm hurt and angry. This awareness keeps me vigilant, constantly checking my motives and actions. But it also makes me afraid of my own anger, sometimes causing me to suppress legitimate feelings rather than express them healthily. I'm still healing, still growing, still figuring out how to live with what I've done while trying to do better. Some days I feel like I've made real progress. Other days I feel like I'm right back where I started, consumed by regret and shame. But I keep trying. Keep choosing to move forward, keep working to become someone I can respect. If there's one message I want people to take from my story, it's this. Revenge is not justice. They might feel similar in the moment, but they lead to vastly different places. Justice is about accountability and consequences within ethical boundaries. Justice can be pursued through legal channels, professional complaint processes, honest conversations, and public disclosure of truth. Justice focuses on making things right, on preventing future harm, on appropriate consequences for wrongdoing. Revenge is about inflicting pain to satisfy your own hurt. Revenge goes beyond consequences to destruction. Revenge doesn't care about fairness or proportionality or collateral damage. Revenge is about making someone suffer because you suffered, about proving you're not powerless by wielding power over someone else. I thought I was pursuing justice against Sarah. I told myself I was teaching her a lesson, showing her that actions have consequences, ensuring she couldn't do to anyone else what she did to me. But I wasn't. I was pursuing revenge, pure and simple. And revenge destroyed me almost as thoroughly as it destroyed her. The price of betrayal is high. It costs you your trust, your sense of security, your faith in people. But the price of revenge is infinitely higher. It costs you your integrity, your peace of mind, your ability to live with yourself. It costs you the person you could have become if you had made different choices. Choose differently than I did. Choose healing over harm. Choose growth over destruction. Choose to be defined by how you rebuild, not by how you retaliate. Your future self will thank you for it. I'm Jennifer Park, and this is my story. Not the story I wanted to tell about my life, but the one I have to tell. The story of how I became a monster in order to defeat one, and what that transformation cost me. The story of the price of betrayal, and the even steeper price of revenge. May my mistakes help you avoid making the same ones. May my story serve as a warning about the true cost of revenge, and may you choose a better path than I did.